Hi guys, welcome and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are well and I hope you guys are staying safe. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this fantastic maxi skirt, and if that's something you're interested in, definitely keep watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. Shout out to the subscriber of the week, Chidima Grace. You've been amazing. Thank you so much. Alright guys, you need the following items. You need your paper scissors, you need your measuring tape, you need your fabric scissors, of course, you need a marker. You'd also need your tailor's chalk or fabric marker. You need some pins and a pin cushion. Ideally, you need some fabric. I have this gorgeous Adire fabric or Adire looking fabric, and it's about 3.5 yards. I actually wanted 3 yards, but there was a bit of an extra, so they shop it in and give it to me. And then obviously you need your pattern. Now for my pattern, this is the skirt pattern that I'm using, and if you don't know how to draft a skirt pattern, go ahead and watch the video that I've linked in iCards above. It shows you how to draft a skirt pattern from start to finish. Now for this, you can decide that you want to make it like slant, which is like a line that I'm drawing somewhere like, between the hip line level. The hip line level is there, just about 2 inches. Now, if you decide you want to do slant, you also have to make it the same on the other side, which is on the back piece as well. So as you can see, I kind of measured where it was on the front piece and I kind of measured where it was on the back piece, and I made this the same. However, that's if you want to make a slant line. For this particular skirt, I decided to make it straight, so I'm going to be cutting along the hip line level, and the hip line level is where I'm like that line where I'm like writing right now. Again, like I said, if you want to make it slant, I recommend about 2 inches above the hip line level and then you slant down as shown. However, for me, I wanted to cut on the hip line level. You can really play around with your skirt if you want, but if you want it slant, remember you're going to have like a V shape in the center front and in the center back. If that's something that you're interested in, go for it. Anyway, so like I said, I wanted straight, so I cut along the hip line level exactly at the point where the hip line level was. So that's why I cut my pieces, and then so that we're sure of the exact pieces, I went ahead to label boldly because I cut off the labeled part. So make sure you label your patterns, guys. Now, I would say that don't throw away the other pieces, keep them because they'll come in handy. So I went ahead to fold mine and keep it. And I'm just going to use this top part. Now that we have our pattern pieces, we're going to get into business and start cutting. Now, like I said, my fabric was 3.5 yards. I wanted 3 yards, but there was a bit of a part that had a joining, and the shop attendant just decided to give me the entire 3.5 yards, which is, it came in handy for me. So go ahead and get your fabric, and then we're going to go ahead and start cutting. Alright guys, so I'm sure you can see the joining of the fabric. So basically I got about half yard extra, which is great for me. So I had like, a really full maxi skirt. But if you can use 3 yards as well. Otherwise, if you can get 3.5, that works. I recommend using 3 yards at the very minimum. So go ahead and fold your fabric. We're going to start cutting, and we'll start cutting with the center front. What I decided to do was separate the stitched part or the joint part, and I was going to be working with this part that had absolutely no joining, which is like the extra half yard that I got. So I folded it into 2, making sure that you have the right sides facing each other on the inside, and then I have the wrong sides against the table and facing me. After I'm happy with the fold, you can go ahead and iron your fabric. If it's a bit rough, go ahead and place the pieces on it. So I'm starting with the center front piece, and as you can see, I'm going ahead to pin it onto the fabric. It's important that you pin it starting from the center front so that it's as flat as possible. After pinning the fabric, you want to go ahead and also mark the sewing allowances. So the sewing allowance I recommend is 1 inch at the side front, so you have a whole 1 inch there, half an inch at the top where it's the waistline, and then 1.5 inches at the bottom. So I say 1.5 inches at the bottom because I didn't have a serger, so I ended up having to hem so that it looks nice and clean. However, if you do have a serger, you can use half an inch at the bottom, but like which is basically what I just marked now. That's if you don't have a serger, but if you do have, that's if you do have a serger rather. So if you have a serger, mark half an inch at the bottom, but if you don't have a serger and you have to hem, I would recommend marking 1.5 inches so you have enough to hem and it looks tidy. I hope I didn't confuse you guys there. Alright guys, now that the allowances have been marked and the front piece is done, we're going to go ahead and repeat the same thing for the back piece. So again, for the back piece, you want to pin your piece onto your fabric. Again, remember that your fabric is folded. I am making all these markings on the wrong sides. So start with the center back and pin and work your way all around the fabric. Make sure it's securely pinned onto the fabric. and then go ahead and mark your sewing allowances. After pinning the back pieces, go ahead and mark out the allowances. The recommended allowances is 1/2 inch at the top, which is where the waist will be, 1 inch at the side back, which is where I'm marking at the moment, 1 inch at the center back, which is where the zipper allowance will be, and then 1.5 inches at the bottom if you have no serger and you have to hem, or 1/2 inch at the bottom if you do have a serger and you can use your serger to finish off the ends. Alright guys, now that all our allowances have been marked, it's now time to cut out our pieces. So go ahead and grab your fabric scissors and cut out your piece as shown, or cut out your pieces rather as shown. Alright guys, so this is a quick announcement to ask you to please subscribe if you have not subscribed. What are you waiting for? It's absolutely free and I have great content. Please, please, please help me. Don't send me back to my village. Subscribe. Thank you. Bye. Alright guys, now that the main skirt pieces have been cut, the next thing to do is to cut out the skirt facing. So for this skirt, we're going to use a skirt facing because we're going to have a bandless skirt, and that's just the way that I want to do it, guys. If you'd like to see how to make it a skirt with a band, I have loads of tutorials showing you guys how to do that. But for this, it's going to be a bandless skirt. So I'm going to be using, again, what's left of the fabric, and I just thought to, use the part that is like mainly black just to give it a nice look. So I'm going ahead to straighten out my fabric with my rotary cutter and my ruler, and then after straightening out my fabric, I'm going to go ahead and place the fabric on it so that I can cut out the facing. Now for the facing, I recommend having a facing length of about 5 to 7 inches. I think that's what I recommend. Your facing length to be. That's why I straightened the end and then kind of marks where I wanted it to be. So depending on what you recommend for your facing or what you want for your facing, go ahead and mark out the length. Like I said, I wanted it to be about 5 inches, but if you think about all the allowance that I needed to make, you needed to finish the ends of the facing as well. I was gonna add 1.5 inches to that, and then 1/2 inch to the top as well. So yes, the facing is also going to have the darts. It's going to have everything that the skirt has. So go ahead and fold the facing fabric onto on the table, making sure the right sides are facing each other. And like I said, I'm just marking where I want my facing to end. I want my facing to end about 4.5 inches, but if I think about the allowance that I need as well, I need to add to the facing. After you've marked where you want the facing to be, you're going to go ahead and pin it in place. So make sure you pin it exactly as you've pinned the main fabric, and then we're going to go ahead and cut out the facing. Alright guys, so after cutting out your facing, it's now time to get to serious work. We're gonna start sewing. Alright guys, so I'm gonna start with the front pieces, and first thing I always do is to mark my dart. If you don't know how I sew my dart, here's gonna show you real quick how I do it. So I kind of snip my dart legs, and the two ends of your dart are called the dart legs. You can use a snip or your pair of fabric scissors, but you have to be careful if you're using your fabric scissors. After creating the snips, again, remember that the facing is there, so you're snipping through the facing as well as the main fabric. I'm going to go ahead and take out some of the pins, not all of the pins, but some of the pins, and then we're going to go ahead and mark out the darts. Now for this one as well, I take the center back and I do the same thing. I like to hold the zip allowance area together so I don't lose track, and then I create a snip at the legs as well, and then I mark the dart points, the dart apex where the dart ends. I mark that as well. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but I put a pin through the dart apex, and then I kind of just marked it with a chalk behind. So let's go back to the front. So go back to the front, take out most of the pins, not all of it, and then we're going to go ahead and mark the apex properly. So I marked it earlier, but only one side. We're going to mark each layer of the apex. So take out the pin carefully without moving it, mark the apex, and then do it on the other side as well. Now that all the apexes have been marked, this is what it looks like. You can now take out all the pins. Now if you have another method of marking your dart that works for you, stick with it. This is something that I find works. I don't want to like puncture a hole to my fabric, because some fabrics don't recover from it while some do. So I found that this one works, because all I have to do is just make a marking and snip the dart legs, which I will sew in place anyway. So go ahead and sew the dart starting from the dart legs up until the apex point that you marked, and remember to do all stitches on the wrong side. After sewing the dart, this is what it looks like. So again, this is the facing, that's why it looks so small. And if you guys notice, I already hemmed the facing so that it looks nice. And then this is the main fabric. Again, I went ahead to sew the dart and I went ahead to hem it. Now because this fabric is a bit funny, you can't really see the hemming clearly, but I promise you I went ahead to hem it so it looks nice. If you had a serger at this point, you would have gone ahead to overlock the ends, but I don't have a serger like I mentioned, or well, as at the time of filming this video, I didn't have a serger. Moving on to the back piece, so again, same thing applies. Take out most of the pins. Like I said, I like to keep the pins on the center back where the zip allowance will be, just so that I don't lose track of them. But take out the rest of the pins and then leave the pin around the apex. We're going to use that to mark the apex. So take out all the pins apart from the pins on the apex and the pins holding the center back pieces together, right? After doing that, you go ahead and put the apex in place, and we're going to go ahead and mark it. Now if you notice on this one, the facing is shorter than the apex, so that's fine, there's nothing to mark on there. But on the main fabric, go ahead and mark the apex. Now after doing that on the main fabric, we're going to mark the wrong side so that we can tell the wrong side of the fabric apart from the right side of the fabric. And we're going to go ahead and sew the dart. For this one where it ends, don't worry, just sew your dart up until where it ends. It doesn't have to be pointed at the apex for the facing of the back. Just sew the dart like you would normally, and then wherever it ends, just make sure you lock. And now for the main fabric, we're going to go ahead and mark our zipper allowance. I tend to leave 8 inches from the top up until 8 inches and mark that, and I leave that area unsewn. Alright guys, so this is what the facing looks like now that the hem has been done, and I went ahead to sew the dart. And then this is what the main fabric looks like. So remember on the main fabric, I left out the zipper allowance about 8 inches unsewn, and I went ahead to sew the rest all the way down, and I did the darts. So now we're going to go ahead and put our pieces together. Go ahead and lay your front piece right side facing up, and then we're going to go ahead and lay the back piece on it. So the right sides of both fabrics should be facing each other, and then the wrong side of the back should be facing you. We're going to go ahead and sew the side seam, and the allowance we left for the side seam is 1 inch. So excuse my hand gesture, and go ahead and sew 1 inch all the way from the top to the bottom. Don't forget to repeat the same thing for the facing by sewing the side seams on 1 inch. Now after sewing the main fabric, here's what it looks like, and as you can see, the hem is all done, it mates nicely, and this is what the back looks like. It's still held in place with a pin, but here's what it looks like. Now for the facing, the same thing was done. This is what it looks like. The side seam was sewn together on 1 inch, and then it was the hem was sewn all the way to the hem. So now that we're done, we're going to place it on each other so you guys can see. However, I just wanted to explain. Now I'm going to take out the pin on the center back of the main fabric, and then I'm going to place it flat. We have the right sides facing us, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and fix the zipper. If you don't know how to fix the zipper, I have a short showing you guys how to do it. So go ahead and watch the shorts. But after fixing the zipper, that's how nice and clean it was. And I did not use a zipper foot, guys. Go ahead and watch the shorts. I'll put a link in the iCards above, in the iCards above, yeah, and in the description bar as well. So watch the shots. After sewing the zipper, the next thing to do is to sew the facing on. And to sew the facing on, what you're going to do is you're going to place the main fabric right sides facing us, and we're going to start from the zipper allowance. We're going to make sure it's flat, and we're going to work our way and pin the facing onto it so that the right sides of the facing is facing the right sides of the main fabric. So I don't know if that's clear, but I'm going to go slow and repeat it again. So repeating this important part, starting from the zipper part, you want to make sure the right sides of the facing and the right sides of the main fabric are facing each other. You want to make sure the seams match, and then you place it on each other and go ahead and sew on 1/2 inch sewing allowance. After sewing, this is what it should look like. As you can see, all the darts meet, the zipper allowance meet, and this is what it looks like. Now it's time for us to close the zipper allowance. We're going to start from the tip, and we're going to sew all the way down. So place it against So as you can see, fold it over and then go ahead and sew all the way down on 1 inch. If it helps as a guide, sew from behind where you can see the already made stitch. After closing the zipper allowance, here's what it looks like, and as you can see, I went ahead to give it a nice iron. So here's what the skirt is looking like. So on the wrong side, you can see the joining of the facing to the main fabric, and I went ahead to top stitch, but that's entirely optional. You don't have to. I decided to. And then after top stitching, this is what it looks like. So give your skirt a good iron if you have one, and at this point our skirt is nearly ready. To finish off the skirt, it's important to know your maxi skirt length, the current length you have, which in this case is 10.5 inches, as you can see that I measured, and then you have to know the width at the bottom, which in my case is about 45 inches. Now, the importance of this is that when you know the bottom width, it would help you decide what you want in terms of the fullness of the skirt. I recommend going 2 times or 2.5 times the width that you measure. So when you measure 45, I recommend going at least 90 inches in terms of the width of the fabric that you're using, and then your skirt length can be determined from your maxi length. So for instance, if your maxi length is 41 inches and what you have is 10.5, then you'll be adding 30.5. If your maxi skirt length is 40 inches and you have 10 inches, you only need to be adding 30 inches plus allowances. So again, that's how I determined how much fabric that I need for the bottom part of it. I went ahead to cut out about 2.5 inches of what I measured at the bottom, and in my case I measured 45 inches. So 45 times 2.5. If you have excess fabric, you can use your width measurements times 3, but standard will be 2.5 to 3 inches depending on how full you want your maxi skirt to be. So alright guys, at this point all I've done is just make sure the fabric width that I needed is there, and I went ahead to fold it into a manageable size. Now when I'm doing this, the next thing I want to do is cut out the length, but you see, I don't like to start at the top just because when you fold, it's not necessarily equal. So I went ahead to fold it into a manageable size and then mark about 1.5 inches so I can start my measurement for the length from there. And like I said, I needed about 31.5 inches if my math is correct, or 30.5 inches, but I also needed to make out like some space for allowance or for the sewing allowance. So I'll say mark whatever you need plus the allowance, which I ended up marking about 32.5 inches, and then mark that and cut off the bottom. So for me, that's the length that I required to add using the formula that I included earlier. So using my rotary cutter, I went ahead to cut off what I needed. And as you notice, I'm using my rotary cutter on my cutting mat, guys, not just on the table. It's going to mess up your table. So cut off what you need, and this is what I need for the length. I'm also going to cut out the top line because it was just there as a guide. I don't need it. It's going to add to my measurement, and it's not even really straight at the top. So after cutting out all the fabric that I need, I'll be left with the length that I require. After sorting out the length, the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that it's straight at the end. So again, remember that the first thing I checked was the width. So I know that the width is fine in terms of the fullness that I desire, but I also wanted to just make sure that it's stretched, so it's straight rather. So what I wanted to do is you want to find the right sides of the fabric and then fold them so that the right sides are facing each other and the wrong side is facing you. Lay them flat on the table, and then I'm going to go ahead and straighten the ends because now we don't have any like factory edges. We have to make sure that all our ends are straight. So as you can see, just fold it into a manageable size. Notch the center as well, that's very important. So notch the center at the top and at the bottom, and then just fold it into a manageable size after doing that. On getting to the edge again, like I said, I already knew it was not straight, so I wanted to straighten it out. I'm going to cut in off about 2 inches just to make sure that it's straight on both sides. So starting from the top, I'm going to go ahead and use my rotary cutter and my ruler or pattern master to cut just a straight line. It's important that you draw your straight line before cutting as well so that you have it as straight as possible. But go ahead and cut it all the way from the top to the bottom. I'm also using the guidelines on my cutting mat as well. They come very handy just to make sure that I'm getting a straight line all the way from the top to the bottom. So go ahead and cut out your pieces, and then now you will have a straight piece of fabric or a straight rectangular piece of fabric and ready to sew your gathers. Alright guys, the next thing we want to do is we want to hem the bottom. So I like to do this and get it out of the way, because when you attach the skirt it becomes heavier. So go ahead and fold it, by hemming. So you want to fold it 1/2 inch and then fold it over again, and then go ahead and hem it. So this is me just hemming the bottom. We're going to start all the way from the top, from the beginning to the end, and it's about, for me it's about 2.5 inches of fabric, or almost even 2.5 yards of fabric, or almost 3 yards of fabric. But go ahead, be persistent, take breaks if you need to, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. All right, my people, so after hemming, here is what it looks like. This is what the hem looks like, and it's all done now. Now the next thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and sew the gathers in place. So to sew the gathers in place, you're going to start from the tip, and we're going to sew on gather stitch. Now for this, you want to make sure your machine is set on the loser stitch. In this case it's 5, and you want to make sure that it's on straight, not zigzag. So set it on 5, and then or the loser stitch for your machine, and we're going to go ahead and sew it in place. So I'm going to get the piece of fabric, and then we're going to start the sewing. One thing to note is when you're doing gathers, you want to make sure that you're not locking your stitch. So don't lock your stitch in the beginning, no locking. Just sew all the way on 1/2 inch. Make sure it's even. Take your time and just, watch your pace. Sew all the way from the top of the fabric, or from the first tip of the fabric to the end of the fabric. Now remember that you're sewing along the width. So if you have 2.5 yards or 2.5 meters, you are sewing along where you normally measure the 2.5 meters. So it's going to be a long sew, but just stay persistent, stay patient, and just keep sewing. Now some people have 2 methods where they sew 2 stitches. So they sew one, and then they sew another one about 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters away from it. But I find that one works for me. But if you're not sure and you feel like you need another one just so that it's secure and it doesn't break, you can go ahead and use the 2-stitch method. Now the best way to do is you want to separate the thread and take the one from the bottom. So we're going to be pulling on the bottom thread, and that's where you're going to be pulling on gently. You don't want it to break, trust me. And then you're going to kind of shift all the gathers, right? You're going to shift it away from where you're pulling and just shift it towards the center, right? We're trying to move it towards the center notch. So you're going to gently do this. Remember that you're pulling on the bottom thread, not the top one. After getting to the center, the next thing to do is also going to pull from the other end. So you want to find the bottom thread, like I'm separating them with a piece of pin, and then find the bottom thread and then pull all the way again to the center on this side as well. So you want to make sure your gathers are evenly distributed, it's not bulky on one side, and you want to do this carefully so you don't break your thread. Now, like I said, if it's convenient for you or if you feel better, or if you're just starting, you can go ahead and sew 2 lines for the gathers, and then you pull on both of them simultaneously. That way you have a backup thread if one of them breaks, right? But like I said, I don't feel the need for. Now that the gathers have been done and it's been evenly distributed, we're going to go ahead and fix this onto the skirt, or onto the micro skirt, like I like to call it. So with the micro skirt, you'll notice that the hem is together, and for me to finish the skirt nicely, that's not necessary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the stitch around the hem. I'm going to loosen up the stitch a little bit so that I can get them separate. So essentially I want to have a little bit of gap between the left side and the right side. So this is around the zipper allowance. I don't know if you can see the zipper sticking out, but just take out the hem there, and then we're going to separate it. We're going to still hem it, but we're going to have them separate. So we're going to have the left side separate and the right side separate, so not hem together like it was before. So go ahead and take out the stitch, and after taking out the stitch, it should be like this. Now we're going to go ahead and loosen it like that. So this is how it's supposed to be, guys. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I'll slow it down so you guys can see it. So alright guys, now that it's lower, this is how it should be. I have them separate, left side, right side. I went ahead to hem it again, but the essence of this is that I can attach my gathers and finish it neatly without having it bulky or anything, right? So it's going to be the same result at the end of the day, but I didn't want bulk. So starting from the left side, I'm going to place the left side on the left side, right sides of the main fabric or of the gathered fabric to the right side of the micro skirt, and we're going to place them on each other. So again, it's important to notch the midpoint of the micro fabric, and as you can see, I used chalk for that. So let's go ahead and place our gathers on it. So you place the right side of the gathers onto the right sides of the micro fabric. You want to make sure that the ends of the gathers is free from gathers for about 1.5 inches. So it's just flat for about 1.5 inches, and your gathers can start after the 1.5 inches. This is so that you don't have bulk around the zipper allowance. So as you can see, I made it flat first, and then I went ahead to spread the gathers starting from the 1.5 inches mark. Now you also want to pin the notch on the gathered fabric to the notch on the micro skirt so that that's in place. That also helps you know how to distribute the gathers that you have. So you're going to be distributing gathers from the notched area up until the end of that allowance or zipper allowance area, and then we're going to do it for the other side as well, from the notch area up until the end of the other zipper allowance. Now it's important that the right sides of the gathered fabric is facing the right side of the micro skirt fabric. It's very important, right sides to right sides, and it's also important that the gathers are evenly distributed. So go ahead, take your time, spread out the gathers, make sure they're evenly distributed, hold them in place with a pin, and after doing that, go ahead and sew on 1/2 inch sewing allowance. After sewing it, this is what it should look like. So as you can see, I've gone ahead to sew the skirt, and this is what it looks like, guys. At this point, your skirt is totally finished. You need to give it a good iron, and you're all done, guys. So this is what the close-up sewing area looks like. I don't know if you guys can see it. All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and finish off the skirt by closing this area. So remember the part that we loosened earlier? We're going to go ahead and start from where we locked, and we're going to sew it all the way down on 1 inch sewing allowance, all the way down on 1 inch sewing allowance to the hem. Now after sewing, this is what it looks like. To avoid bulk, as you can see, I tend to open up my seams, but at this point, guys, your skirt is totally finished. Give it a good iron, give it a good trim, make sure you have no loose threads sticking out, and then go ahead and rock your maxi skirt just in time for like spring, guys. All right there, beautiful people, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope it was worth your while. Again, don't forget to check out the tutorial on how I was doing my invisible zip with no zip footer, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. See you next week, guys. Bye.